Hi, I'm Anika She, and she talks crime. Hello? First, I want to start this episode by saying I'm so sorry that I missed last week's episode. I was on a good, consistent run, but girl, it's December. I have gotten so busy and I'm literally a one-man show. I do the research for this, I film by myself, I edit by myself, and I upload and post clips. So I do everything, and I was just getting very overwhelmed last week. And I didn't want to give you guys a half but episode. I didn't want to curse. I don't know if I could curse on on this podcast. But yes, let's jump into our imaginary scenario. You're in your car, minding your business, headed for a good day out. Let's say you're going to the mall or you're going out to eat with friends. You're just chilling, having a good time. You're at a red light, and when the light turns green, you're getting ready to go. But at that intersection on the other side, the person whose light is currently red runs that light and hits the car in front of you. You just saw a car accident firsthand, and now it's not a very serious car accident. Like, it doesn't look like anybody's dead, but it's still very concerning. What would you do in that scenario? You aren't hit, you were just a witness, and you were directly behind the car that got hit. Now, I feel like the average citizen would probably just hope and pray that everyone's all right and probably just go about their business. Maybe even check in on the victim through their window and be like, hey, are you okay? And once they get confirmation, you would probably go ahead. But if maybe you're the more heroic type, maybe you'd get out of your car. Maybe you'd pull over, get out the car, try to help the driver, see what's going on with the person who hit, maybe even wait for the police to come with them. But that all depends on the kind of person you are. Now, I wonder if your answer would change if you thought that the person who hit the other car was a drunk driver. And now, what if that person you thought was a drunk driver left the scene of the crime? Would you follow that person, that drunk driver? Would you approach them with an armed weapon and would you shoot and kill them? I don't think most people would do that. But on May 7th, 2019, 21-year-old Hannah Payne would shoot and kill 62-year-old Kenneth Herring for that exact reason. Let's get into the case. We're in Clayton County, Georgia, at an intersection. On one side of this intersection, we have Kenneth Herring, a 62-year-old husband, father, brother, and son. His family describes him as a funny, joking, annoying older brother type. He was the head of his 5 siblings, and he was the type to leave funny voicemails and give nicknames to all of his siblings and boss his nieces and nephews around. He was a funny guy. He was a nice guy to be around. And on the other side of the intersection is a semi-truck driver in a semi-truck, and he's the first at the light. And directly behind him is 21-year-old Hannah Payne. She's in a Jeep and she's a property manager. So she basically collects rent. She's the person who shows new residents the apartment building and things of that nature, just to give you background on who we're talking about. Now, Hannah and the semi-truck driver's light turns green, and like everybody else would, when your light turns green, you go. But as they started to go, they didn't expect that Kenneth Herring would actually run his red light and ram directly into the semi-truck. Now, this semi-truck is a hefty semi-truck. It's an 18-wheeler. And Kenneth is just in a pickup truck. So obviously, the majority of the damage will probably go towards Kenneth's vehicle. This was a minor crash, as in nobody was like extremely hurt. There was no deaths. There was no like crumpled up cars anywhere. It was a minor collision, but all car accidents are serious car accidents. So what everybody does, what happens when you get into a car accident? You get out of the car, you speak to the other driver, you try to collect information. The semi-truck driver gets out of his car, and so does Kenneth Herring, the two people who were involved in the accident. Hannah Payne, who was directly behind and was never touched, involved, or hurt from this accident, also got out of her car and joined the other two at the scene of the crime. An off-duty state corrections officer had also joined them at the scene of the crime. And while Hannah was calling 911, this off-duty state corrections officer was speaking to Kenneth. He had medical training and he deduced that Kenneth was having some sort of medical emergency, some sort of medical crisis. Kenneth was disoriented. He was confused. He had orangey red eyes and he was circling around his truck a bunch. He was just displaying very odd behavior that to an average person would probably look like he was drunk, look like he was under the influence of something. But to this off-duty state corrections officer with medical training, he could probably deduce that this also looks like somebody who is going into diabetic shock. Kenneth stayed at the scene of the crime for about 15 to 20 minutes before he got back in his truck and he left. Now, when the off-duty state corrections officer was speaking to the semi-truck driver and Hannah, when they asked him, what's up with that dude? Like, what did he say? The off-duty state corrections officer said, and I quote, "He's okay, but he's definitely inebriated." Hannah and the semi-truck driver simultaneously said, "Do you mean he's drunk?" And now this confuses me because this off-duty state corrections officer has medical training, admits that he can see that Kenneth was having a medical emergency, and I still don't understand why he would say to them that he was inebriated. It doesn't make any sense. And even when I looked up the word inebriated, because sometimes we use words in only one context when they have other meanings. So maybe inebriated can also mean disoriented, confused, something like that. But when I looked it up, inebriated only has one meaning. I don't know why this officer told them that he thought he was drunk when he actually thought he was having a medical emergency. Now, this put the battery in Hannah's back because from that moment, she decided that Kenneth was drunk, he was a danger to anybody else on the road, and that she personally had to stop him. She realized that she should follow him when, after he left the scene, everybody realized they didn't have any of his information. They didn't have his name, his number, his license plate. They didn't have his insurance. They didn't have any recognizable information for him so that this issue could be resolved the proper way through insurance. While on the phone with 911, because Hannah was on the phone with 911 the entire time, from she got out the car to when Kenneth was speaking to the corrections officer to when Kenneth left, she was still on the phone with 911, and they asked her, "Did you happen to get his plates?" When she said no, and the semi-truck driver said no, and the corrections officer said no, Hannah decided she was going to get those plates, even though the 911 operator told her on 4 different occasions, "Do not chase him, do not follow him, I want you to be safe, do not go after him." Hannah still got in her car and followed Kenneth Herring to wherever he was going. Hannah said that with the operator on the phone, she felt like she could be a messenger for 911.
I was under the impression, with me having 911 on the phone, that I could just be kind of like a messenger.
So when the 911 operator told her, "Do not chase him, do not follow him," Hannah said, and I quote, "He is drunk. I'm not. I'm sorry, but I'm here to tell you I'm not going to follow him because he is going to cause an accident." She said that right before she confronted Kenneth Herring at an intersection. Now, I'm going to tell you Hannah's versions of events, and then I'm going to tell you the truth, which has photo, video, and witness-based evidence. Hannah says that while on the phone with 911 in her car and following Kenneth closely behind, she realized that he stopped in a turning lane. She took this as her opportunity to pull up to the lane beside him and get out of her car. Once she got out of the car, she said that she was holding out the phone with the 911 operator on it and saying, "Hey, they want us to go back to the scene," as calmly as I just said it.
At that point is when we had both come up to the intersection and I saw him stopped in the turning lane. So I turned as well, and when I stopped, I was under the impression, with me having 911 on the phone, that I could just be kind of like a messenger. So I took my phone on speaker and I took it to him to show him that I had the police on the phone, and I'm telling him they want us to go back to the original accident site.
She said that when she began to approach Kenneth's vehicle, he started to shout, "Who the F are you? Who the F are you?" So they both started to shout at each other until Kenneth reached out of his vehicle and grabbed her, ripping her shirt. And as he was holding her body close to his car, like with his grip, she says that he hit the gas and was dragging her with his car. Hannah says that while shouting at her, he kept saying, "I have something for you, Beware, I have something for you." She told him that she has a gun, and when he started to drag her with his car, that's when she took the gun out and had it in her hand. She said she was trying to push and pull away to get away from his vehicle, but that he had too strong of a grip, and then he started to reach for her gun. Once he started reaching for the gun, he grabbed it and the gun went off, and Mr. Herring was shot in his abdomen, and that's how he died, according to Hannah Payne. Now I'll tell you what the photos, videos, and witnesses say happened. Now, remember when Hannah said that she saw him stopped at a turning light and she just pulled her vehicle next to him and got out? In reality, she aggressively cut Kenneth off, throwing her vehicle directly within his path. Witnesses say she immediately jumped out of her car with her phone in hand and was shouting obscenities at Kenneth. When she approached his vehicle, she was punching him in that car as Kenneth sat there confused the entire time. All witnesses say they never once saw Kenneth's hand come out of the vehicle, only her trying to enter his vehicle. The video shows her pummeling him with her left hand and her gun in her right hand. Witnesses at the scene said that she threatened to shoot him, and as soon as she did, immediately after, the gun goes inside the car and you hear shots ring off. You never see who actually shoots who.
And when you say she was trying to fight him through the window, what did you actually see?
I just saw her hands moving. Get out of the car, motherfucker. Doing all this. I never saw anyone's hands come out of the window, per se, but I did see her at the window.
And could you see anything that the victim was doing inside of the vehicle at that time?
I couldn't see anything he was doing inside the vehicle. I never saw his hands come out of the vehicle from where I was.
After you observed her hands moving and telling the victim to get out of the vehicle, what, if anything else, did you see?
Her pull a gun. After she pulled the gun, she shot him and she said, "Now you need an ambulance."
Now, when she pulled the gun, when did you hear the shot?
Immediately.
Trigger warning, I do have the video and I'm going to play it next. The only reason why I'll play the video is because it isn't a very graphic video. You don't actually see the gun shoot anyone. It's obstructed by the actual vehicle. You just get to see the placement of everyone and understand the scene. If you're a listener of the podcast, you could go onto YouTube to look at it. But yes, I just want to warn you all before I play it. Witnesses at the scene said that after Kenneth was shot, he laid back in his seat and his eyes went white. Nearby officers who were directing traffic were alerted to the shooting and made their way over to the scene, where they found Kenneth on the ground, but he was still breathing. They rushed him to a hospital nearby, where he died 12 minutes later. The saddest part is that Kenneth was experiencing diabetic shock. His wife believes that he was trying to get to Southern Regional Medical Center, a hospital nearby, and he was shot and killed near the Hartsfield-Jackson Airport. And when I looked it up, he was only about 10 minutes away from that hospital before he was killed. His toxicology report showed that he had no drugs and no alcohol in his system when he died. His cause of death was not diabetic shock, but it was actually the gunshot wounds to his abdomen. At the crime scene, Hannah was placed in handcuffs and put in the back of a cop car, where a police officer was questioning her and trying to get her account of what happened. Immediately, all the witnesses nearby told the police officer that she was lying through her teeth, that she was the aggressor, she approached him, she brought out a gun, and she shot him. They said that even after he was shot, Hannah never once tried to help him. And you would think if this was an accidental shooting and that he shot himself, that she would probably try to help this man, try to, put some gauze on him, try to get him out the vehicle. No, all she said after he was shot was, "Now you need an ambulance." That's evil. Like, also, I'm going to warn you that with this case, from this point all the way until sentencing, the way that Hannah, her lawyer, and her family handled this case was so dumb, annoying, and filled with lies and just audacity. So, trigger warning for that. Hannah was later brought in for official questioning with investigators, and luckily with this case, there is full videos of the trial, of testimonies, of the interrogations. So I was able to see her be interrogated, and it's so interesting. I found, and also all the people in the comment section found, she was incredibly calm during this interrogation. And a trick that a lot of investigators will use is they will sometimes have the perpetrator wait in the room for a long, undisclosed amount of time by themselves because it reveals so much about that person, like their body language, how they choose to spend that time, what they do in the room, what they say to themselves. It usually will help them in the investigation. So, as you see Hannah waiting for the investigators to come in, she's literally sitting there with her hands crossed, just patiently waiting calmly, no tears, no frustration, nothing on her face. She then starts to bite her nails, like bite off her nail tips, and she places them peacefully in her pockets. She lays her head down as if to take a little nap. And I'm confused. I'm thoroughly confused because Hannah later says that she thought she was being questioned as a witness. If you had a gun and you brought a gun to a situation and your gun went off and killed somebody, we don't even have to say who tapped the gun. It's your gun. You're not a witness. You are a part of this. Like, I don't even understand why she would think that she was a witness, but this lady thinks that she is so right that she cannot see the situation for what it is. Even while she's being questioned by a woman and a man, but the woman is leading the investigation. As she's giving her account of events, it's so weird to see she's like trying to appeal to the investigator and trying to get the investigator to like tell her she's right in a way. Like, I've never seen somebody be interrogated like that. Like, she was putting all the blame on Kenneth Herring, but she was also like annoyed that she was even being questioned, if that made sense. And she was just kind of trying to get the investigator to be like, yeah, I get you, girl. The other part of it that does not make sense to me is at no point does she show any remorse. And the thing is, if you're following her version of events that he shot himself with her gun and it was an accident and that she never intended to shoot him, even if you killed someone by accident, a normal person would feel bad. They would have remorse. At no point was she ever sorry. She never showed any remorse for this man's death. And that's really odd to me. Hannah was initially indicted on all 8 counts, which are 2 counts of felony murder, 3 counts of possession of a weapon during a crime, 1 count each of malice murder and aggravated assault, and false imprisonment. Now, when you're indicted, that's just when you're formally accused of doing something. You haven't been proved of doing that thing and you haven't been charged with it yet, but they're formally accusing you. She was only charged at that time with the fatal shooting, so she was able to be released on $100,000 bond and she was put on an ankle monitor. She also had to surrender her carry license, her passport, and all of her firearms. But with more evidence coming out, her having a bond just didn't seem justifiable. So her bond was revoked after 3 weeks. And again, if you don't know, a bond is basically the amount of money that you can pay to be able to get out of jail. So while you're awaiting your trial or whatever is going to happen in the case, you can go home. You don't have to stay in the jail as long as you have the money for it, which brings a whole nother conversation of social and economical advantages that happen to people when they have the money. But that's neither here nor there. So her bond was revoked after 3 weeks of being on house arrest, and she turned herself in the very next day. But her lawyer was fighting for her, which we'll get into her lawyer because he's a whole other case on his own. He fought for her, saying that she wasn't a threat to society, she wasn't a flight risk, and she didn't do anything malicious. So she deserves to be able to go to work and be able to go home because she was having financial problems due to not being able to work. So she was given bond again and given an ankle monitor and a curfew. So she went home again. This crime happened in 2019 and it didn't go to trial until 2023, literally this year. And in between all of that time, for the majority of it, Hannah was sitting comfortably in her home. Now, let's get into the trial. It was a 5-day trial with a 12-person jury, consisting of 11 black people and one white person. Now, we can't talk about this case without getting into the optics of it. I don't think I mentioned, unless you've already seen, but Kenneth Herring was a black man, and Hannah Payne is a white woman. We all know that America has a long-standing history of black people dying at the hands of people who feel they have authoritative power or people who actually have authoritative power. And a lot of those cases, those people with the power are white. Now, looking at this case just from an outside perspective, it is very easy to feel that it is racism that's the driving force behind it. And maybe racism is a factor in this case, but in a more covert, institutionalized way. When you want to get into the conversation of the supposed entitlement of a lot of white people, like when you see those endless videos online of white people demanding identification and answers from people of why they're on this specific property, what are they doing here, and feeling like they have a certain authority over other people. Maybe that's involved in this case in a way, and maybe she felt that way because of her identity as a white woman, or she has a vigilante complex. I don't know for sure, but my personal feelings are that she didn't kill Kenneth Herring because he was a black man. I think she killed him because she had the audacity to do so, because she felt like she could, if that makes sense. And the jurors on this case, who were a majority black, also shared this similar sentiment. After their verdict was given, they assured the courts and the public that their decision was not based off of, is she racist? Is this racism? There was ample evidence to show what she did. That's what they based it off of. And they were able to make that decision based off of the evidence, based off of what they saw and heard in court, because the prosecutor on this case, the person defending Kenneth Herring and his family, she was a black woman, but she didn't make the case about race because she didn't have to. All of the evidence was there to prove that she brought aggression to the situation unnecessarily. She brought out a weapon. She falsely imprisoned him and she killed him. That it's as plain as cut as that. They didn't even need to bring racism into it. While in court, many people felt that Hannah showed no remorse. She looked disinterested, and to be honest with you, she looked pretty annoyed the entire time, especially when the witnesses were giving their testimonies and when the family was given like their impact statements and things like that. She did not even look solemn. And it's crazy because she had on a cross necklace and earrings. She got Jesus all over her, but she don't even want to look like she's sorry. It makes no sense. Like, why even wear this? Because everyone knows that what you wear to court is very important. How you present yourself shows people who you are in a way. As much as everybody wants to say don't judge a book by its cover, we all do it, even if it's subconscious. So her wearing that cross necklace, and it was a big bold cross necklace, she wore it intentionally to try to get people to believe, oh my goodness, she's just a sweet little religious girl. She didn't even mean to do this. Mind you, she looks irritated in court the whole time. The only time that she cried was when she was recounting her version of events when she was put on the stand. And by crying, I mean she made a crying face. I personally did not see any tears roll down her face, but she was crying really hard when sentencing came and she found out her fate. Then she was actually crying. Between all of that, she was stone-faced the whole time in trial. Now, Hannah was being represented by her lawyer named Matt Tucker. And now, I already told y'all, this man, he was a whole situation on his own. And it was actually very uncomfortable to watch. Many people in the comment section of the court video said that they thought he was drunk. He was slurring his words during court. He seemed confused, disoriented. He didn't know how to work any of the technology. He asked witnesses on the stand questions multiple times, like the same question over and over again. He was getting things wrong. Like he would ask them, "Oh, could you go to page 3 and read what it says right there?" And the person would be like, "That isn't what it says on page 3. Like he was so confused. Honestly, he was a really bad lawyer, but I'm not going to sit here and say that she deserved a better one because she didn't. To be honest with you, it seemed like he was hurting her case, and the judge on this case said the same thing to her as he showed up to court late many times or just didn't show up at all without explanation. And he had the trial delayed after he claimed he had a stroke and he just didn't show up. But he didn't provide any like doctor's note, any evidence that he actually had a stroke. And he was found in contempt of court. And the judge was so annoyed with him, she reported him to the state bar because he is a bad lawyer. Honestly, I've never seen a lawyer like this. Like, it was actually so weird. And I don't know why they hired him as her lawyer or even kept him because he was doing a really bad job. And on top of doing a bad job, he was playing semantics in court. And if you don't know, semantics is when you pick at little things that people say and little terminology just to try to be annoying. And a lot of times, lawyers will do that when they don't have an actual defense. So he would be in court trying to pick apart exactly what a witness said to investigators versus what they said in court, when what they said is very similar to what they said before.
Coworker called me and she said, "Dang, that car almost ran you off the road." And I said, "Yes, that crazy bitch is gonna cause an accident."
Now, can you look at the statement I was saying right there where it says Ashley Jackson? It says, one of my coworkers, she was pulling up behind me and she called me and says, "Dang, that car almost ran her off the road." Not you, her. Is that correct?
I said what I said. I'm not sure why it says her, but when I said it, I was speaking in third person. Like my coworkers calling me saying, "Dang, that car almost ran you off the road." So I'm not sure why it's typed that way.
So you're saying whoever listened to this audio of your interview inadvertently put her instead of you?
Could have been.
He made himself and Hannah look a fool many times in court. Here's some of the things that he tried to say to defend Hannah. He said, quote, "It just seems like an unfortunate situation of a good Samaritan trying to stop a person on a hit and run." Then he said, quote, "She's a young individual that got on the phone with 911 and thought she was helping out by getting the tag number. At her age, she learned a very valuable lesson." What a weird thing to say on a case where your client killed somebody else when she didn't have to. Like, to say that she was a good Samaritan when she literally cut this man off. And on top of the fact, remember earlier when she said that she was just concerned that he would hurt someone else and she thought he would cause another accident? She didn't actually care about him causing another accident because in order to follow him, she was weaving in and out of traffic and she almost hurt other people. And some of those victims actually spoke up and said, "Yeah, she almost ran me off of the road." She did not care about other people's safety and she was not a good Samaritan. And if that's the defense he was going with, you already knew she was going to lose in court. His main defense was that it was self-defense while trying to perform a citizen's arrest. But that does not make sense because by law, you cannot claim self defense if you are the aggressor. And that's not even an opinion. It is a fact that she is the aggressor because they were not in a situation together. She put herself in that situation with him. She brought the weapon to that situation. She's the aggressor. You cannot claim self defense. I don't know. It was so weird.
You do recall saying, that crazy bitch is going to cause an accident.
Yes.
Okay, so at that time, you had decided because of her driving that she was a crazy bitch, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And
Pretty much.
okay. And you didn't know what was going on. You didn't know why she was driving that way. You just assessed that that's who she is based on that driving.
She was speeding up the road and she almost ran me off the road. So that's someone's natural reaction. So I'm not judging her per se because I don't know her, but that's someone's natural reaction when someone almost runs you off the road. You like, dang. So yes, that is my comment. That's what I said at the time.
It was literally so embarrassing. He was trying to make it seem like Kenneth had beat her up within like an inch of her life and she was so severely bruised and battered. He's showing pictures in court and I'm going to put them on the screen. If you're a visual watcher, you'll see it. If you're a listener, I'll tell you. He's showing a picture of her cheek and he asked one of the people on the stands, what does she see there? And the person literally was like, it looks like a little bit of pinkness. Like it didn't even look really swollen. Like he was showing little scratches that she had on her arm and a little swelling on the back of her neck. And I'm literally thinking to myself, I have seen cat owners with more severe injuries. Like it literally was little cute little scratches and little welting. And yes, her shirt was torn. He also showed that her shirt was ripped all the way down, almost ripped in half, but it wasn't. But that would make sense if Kenneth Herring is fighting for his life because a random woman with a gun just came up to his car, shouting and screaming at him, threatening to kill him, and he is in diabetic shock. Yeah, I would be grabbing and fighting for my life too. And he's so concerned about, oh my goodness, the injuries that Hannah witnessed. And mind you, she's like fake whimpering while he's doing this. Oh my goodness, the injuries that Hannah had. Mind you, the injury that Kenneth had is death. He's dead now because of her. Like it was a circus act, honestly, that lawyer was performing. Like, and a lot of times when you see a bad lawyer, you usually also see a bad client because they're being advised terribly by this person. And bad advice did he give her because she sat up on that stand and lied through her teeth. Like, honestly, I was scared for her while she was lying because, you take an oath. You can literally go to jail for lying on the stand. And she was lying blatantly. And I don't know why she wasn't in trouble for that, but maybe they were giving her mercy because they threw the whole book at her. But honestly, she met her match with the prosecutor for Kenneth Herring because that woman was making her look like a fool every chance she get. Here's one of the lies that Hannah told. The prosecutor said to Hannah, you said that you had no intentions of ever pulling the trigger that day. And Hannah says, yes. The prosecutor says, so when you said I'm going to shoot you, you were bluffing? Hannah then says, no, I wasn't bluffing. So if you were not lying about going to shoot him, you had intentions of shooting him. Like that, it doesn't even make sense to lie. And she has nothing to say back every time the prosecutor stumps her. Remember when I told you that the 911 operator told her 4 times not to chase him? Hannah claims, no, she didn't. I never heard that. Check out the clip.
That's the 3rd time she's telling you to not continue to follow Mr. Herring and go back to the location. Correct?
No, that's when she told me to go back to the location the first time. She didn't say anything about not following.
All right. And so what is your response to the dispatch at that time? You can read the next paragraph.
That there's a police officer. Okay, well, there is a police officer there, but he is drunk. I'm sorry, but I'm here to tell you I'm not going to follow him because he's going to cause another accident. So I will stay behind him until an officer can get to us. But until then, I'm not moving.
Right. So you were aware that dispatcher did not want you to continue to follow Mr. Herring, correct?
Sure.
Is that a yes?
Yes.
Hannah says in court that Kenneth shot himself, and then they play the clip where the officer says, "Who shot him?" And she says, "I did." What? Like, she's lying when there is proof. It's scary. It's scary. It's scary. How can you just sit there and lie? Then, when they ask her, "Oh, did you cut him off aggressively? Did you throw your vehicle in front of him?" She says, "Oh no, I was in the next lane. I never was over there next to him." And they asked her, "How much distance was there between you and Mr. Kenneth's vehicle?" And she said it was about the size of this desk. And she's at the stand. So it's like a regular size school desk.
Y'all have not made contact, correct?
No, we have not.
So how far do you think you pulled over the distance between you and his truck?
Well, he was in the turning lane, and I was in what would be considered like the right straight lane. And the distance between the vehicles were probably, maybe the width of this table.
Do you see this picture of her and his car literally touching? Where is the school desk distance? Like, it is scary how she was lying and that she really thought that the jury was dumb. You know what I mean? And if you caught me even slightly laughing, please don't get it confused. I'm laughing at the audacity of this woman. Like, I'm baffled at her and her lawyer and how dumb they are, to be honest with you. Hannah also made it a point to make it clear that at the time, she thought that the off duty corrections officer was a regular police officer because he flashed his badge, and an average person sees a badge and they'll just think you're a police officer. And she also said that he encouraged her to go, to follow Kenneth. My question is, if you thought this man was a police officer and he didn't follow Kenneth, why would you follow Kenneth? That don't even make no sense. Like, but in court, evidence did show that there was male DNA on the top side of the gun, proving that Kenneth did touch the gun. But just because he touched it doesn't mean that he shot himself. It further proves that they were in a struggle, which is what all the witnesses said. After seeing all of the witnesses' testimony, everyone had a clear depiction of what happened. They're not confused and they're all strangers. They have no motive to convene together and lie. They all say that she was aggressive, abrasive, and unremorseful. They were in a struggle. She was endangering other drivers. She shot him and she lied to the police. They all say the same thing. Also, I think the craziest part about this is that none of this is justified. He should have never died. But I feel like you would think that if there was anybody who would have wanted maybe to kill Kenneth, it would be the man that he hit, the man in the semi truck. That man, after he got hit, was nowhere near this case. He did not follow Kenneth. Like, I didn't even see he testified. I didn't get to see any of that footage. I looked it up. I don't know if he testified. Nobody else has any evidence. It's like you did all of this and you weren't even hit. You weren't even actually affected. And you can't say that you were doing this to help and save other people because you put other people in danger. It's crazy. It's crazy. To show you how unremorseful she is, I don't know if unremorseful is a word, not remorseful. While in court, she would refer to him as the guy in the truck. She has known his name for 4 years since she killed him. Like, you can't even give his family the decency of calling him his name. Like, that's so disrespectful. And it's crazy because she also said this all could have been avoided. Yes! You could have avoided interjecting yourself, pulling out a gun, and shooting this man who was minding his business. It's also crazy to me because I feel like she never acknowledges, even if the scenario was what she thought it was. Like in her head, if she truly thought he was a drunk driver and she killed him, maybe in some sick, twisted way, she could feel justified. But after finding out with medical proof that this man had no drugs, no alcohol in his system, and that he was going into diabetic shock, you don't feel bad then? Like it's really beyond me. Like Luckily, the jury saw beyond all of the games, lies, and antics that Hannah and her lawyer were trying to pull, and they found her guilty on all charges, which I'll repeat again, which are 2 counts of felony murder, 3 counts of possession of a weapon during a crime, 1 count of malice murder, 1 count of aggravated assault, and 1 count of false imprisonment. The judge sentenced her to life for the murder, and she was also given an additional 13 years after she completes that life sentence. Now, I actually found out earlier this year, I feel like the average person, when you hear, oh, they got life, you think this person is going to be in there until they die. Life sentences are typically 15 to 30 years, depending on the state. So really, most people who get life, they only have to serve that amount of time. And if they're given parole, then they'll get that after they serve it. In Georgia, the life sentence is 30 years. So Hannah has to serve 30 years plus the 13 additional years that she was given, totaling her at 43 years. And she was given parole, so she'll be able to get parole after those 43 years. Also, parole is when you are released from prison and you're able to go back into the public and your community, but you are still being supervised by a police officer or your parole officer. Also, it's so weird that looking at the court footage while Hannah's on the stand and being questioned by the prosecutor, it literally looks like her lawyer is coaching her, because when the prosecutor asked Hannah certain questions, her lawyer is literally sitting there nodding or shaking his head while looking at her, like as if to tell her, oh, don't say that, or yes, say that. Like, what? And when Hannah took the stand to defend herself, she said she never drew her weapon before that day and she never meant to fire, and that he shot himself. It took the jury only an hour and a half to agree that Hannah was guilty on all charges, and an hour and a half is extremely fast for a group of 12 people to agree on something. The lead prosecutor's closing argument was that, quote, you don't get the death penalty for a traffic violation. And I think that that was an amazing way to end off, because it really puts into perspective what this situation actually really was. Think of how many times you've rolled through a stop sign. Think of how many little fender benders you've been involved with. Imagine if people killed you for that. Everybody makes driving mistakes. Did he deserve to die? During the 4-year-long battle to get this to trial, both families were receiving so much aggressive death threats and threatening messages that the prosecutor actually is investigating it because of the severity of the threats. And it also makes no sense, because Kenneth's family, nor did Hannah's family, even though they encouraged support and victimized her, they did not personally do anything in this case. They did not commit any crimes. So why would people be threatening them? But I am happy that Kenneth's family was able to get the justice that they had been fighting for. They were so happy. In court, they said that they know they weren't supposed to show emotions once the verdict was given, but they couldn't help but cry because they loved their brother. And I'm so happy that justice was finally served, because, you know, in a lot of these cases, again, where it's a white person killing a black person, a lot of times we never get the answer that we really want. It's a shame that Kenneth will never be able to see his family again, walk, talk, breathe, see his children. But I'm glad that this case got justice it deserved. And like always, all of the articles and videos that I use for my research are listed in the description box. I hope you guys stay safe, and I'll see you on the next one.
Hello?